Speaker. I'll be sharing my time with the member from the beautiful town of Edmonton, or area of Edmonton Riverbend. He told me to say that, by the way. I'm honoured to represent the hard-working people of Elgin, Middlesex, London, and today I stand to discuss Bill C-29 with many of their concerns in mind. Just 1 year ago, the Liberals promised modest deficits and many more promises. We have heard media reports showing that the cost of food will be going up 5% in the new year. Not one new full-time job has been created. With the new measurements put in place by this government, it is harder for Canadians to purchase homes under the new mortgage laws. Instead, we see huge deficits, high taxes, and low economic growth. And let me continue. We hear about the carbon tax that will be introduced by all provincial and territorial governments and enforced by the federal government. We have an infrastructure bank that will not be supporting rural Canada at all. We have infrastructure projects that this government suggests have been approved, but where is the actual work being done? And tax cuts that were scheduled for small businesses were reversed. Tax credits to help families to offset the cost of children's arts and fitness tax credits or programs cancelled. We have seen extravagant spending on programs, but nothing to show for the expenditure of these dollars. Canadians are growing concerned. Just yesterday in the House, this government did not deny their plans for new taxes on health and dental benefits. Seriously, with every middle-class tax cut, there's a new tax introduced for all Canadians, young and old, rich and poor. Let's just stop kidding ourselves. The economy is stagnant, and the Liberals' promise to spend their way to prosperity is failing. There seems to be a lot of talk, but honestly, I am worried, not only for the next generation, and the large debt load that this government is burdening them with, but I'm worried for our current generation, where people are finding it difficult to pay for their hydro and cannot find a job. Students are graduating from universities with no chance of permanent full-time positions and are not getting the chances to use their higher education because the government is not creating the necessary environment for job creation. Is the sky falling? No, but it is pretty gloomy out there. Back in July, I did a lot of media regarding the new Canada Child Benefit, and as the critic for families, children and social development, I was asked my thoughts on this new program. I am not going to deny that it does help families, but we're talking about a very unsustainable program that, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, will cost $42.6 billion over the next 5 years. The Parliamentary Secretary said that these plans will be going forward regardless of the strain on public finances. I am just wondering, where is this money going to come from? If we have a government that does not create a single job and spends out of control, where do we get to the revenue to pay for these programs? And I'm really hoping that the government is actually listening to this speech and keeping that in mind. The answer to this question, though, as we see it, is more taxes. More and more taxes will continue to be introduced by this government with no concern for the average taxpayer. In a letter received in my office on December 1st of 2016, an open letter that was sent to members of Canadian Parliament, the author discusses the impact of Bill C-29 and states, open quote, the complicated, administratively burdensome and compliance-challenged income tax provisions, end quote, that will be on businesses. Who and why would we want this to be the case? We see a lot of things that are coming down from this Liberal government that do not seem to be looked at, does not seem to be the appropriate measures for an average Canadian and for Canadian businesses. Here in this House, we hear many quotes from executives and analysts, but I'd like to share with you 5 quotes from people who I think are experts, taxpayers who pay their bills and the bills of this government. These are from householders that I received, and I will be quoting the fantastic people and constituents from Elgin, Middlesex, London. Wayne Johnson from St. Thomas wrote, I believe that policies such as carbon tax and so-called cap-and-trade initiatives are environmentally useless and serve only to increase the tax burden on Canadians who are already overtaxed. Carl Crocker from my hometown of Sparta. I don't think our present government gives a blank. I'm being kind there because it really didn't say blank, about the average rural taxpayer. With the carbon tax, hydro rates, and now natural gas going up, we are mad. Gary and Vicky Gould from St. Thomas wrote, the carbon tax is going to chase us out of our home. We have already 2 medium-sized businesses going to the United States if the carbon tax goes through. They do not want to move, but we have to because of the cost of their utilities. James Manning from Dorchester. Number 1, good-paying jobs need to be secured, and new investment in Canada in all job sectors is needed. And number 2, follow up on government work projects to be completed as stated. And these are parts of concerns also for the 2017 budget, where people are getting on track and voicing their opinions now because they're concerned of what they're seeing in their Canada today. Edwin Zavitz from Dorchester said, "The Liberal GOO will do the same as always and tax and spend and steal from the people. The Prime Minister is the same as his father, looks down at his nose at Canadians." This government needs to start listening to taxpayers, who are the people burdened by the government's debt. And without proper employment and precarious employment, revenue to this government is going to be precarious. Despite the big spending being done by this government, the Bank of Canada, the International Monetary Fund, and the OECD have all downgraded their forecast for Canada for both 2016 and 2017. Jobs are in short supply, and I have not seen job creation that this government has promised. The cost of living continues to rise, and this government is making it harder for Canadians. This government needs to refocus their plans for growing this economy. Instead of meeting at Liberal fundraisers with billionaires, this government needs to start meeting with small business owners and ordinary, everyday Canadians. It is the philosophy that actions speak louder than words that needs to be the front of mind for this government. We hear so much about the government's plans to raise more families into the middle class, but we don't see the programs that are actually doing it. We hear time and time again about reducing taxes for the middle class with one hand, but on the other hand, all we see are tax increases for every single Canadian. The carbon tax is something extremely concerning to me. During the month of November, I held an agricultural roundtable with local producers. The carbon tax was discussed, and it was a great concern to many of these farmers. And I would like to note, during this discussion, it was not I who brought up the carbon tax. It was just in a regular roundtable where people could speak their mind. We know that it will increase the costs of doing business. In Elgin, Middlesex, London, over 20% of people are connected to the agricultural sector. What type of negative impact are we going to see? We hear that the price of gas will be going up 11 cents per litre. What happens to rural Canadians who have to drive to work every day? Public transportation is not an option. Therefore, the growth with their current strategy does not have the impact on farmers or rural people from Rodney to Thorndale in my riding. Because of this new tax, they will see increased expenses. We know that the cost of shipping of goods will be increased, and at the end of the day, this cost will be passed on to the consumer. The same people will be paying more for gas, taxed on their dental and health benefits, and taxed to pay for this huge debt. At the end of the day, they will continue to just pay more money out of their pockets. This government needs to find a solution to help put people back to work. They need to find a way of getting those who are looking for jobs back into the labour force. People cannot continue to be unemployed. And that takes me to the changes to the unemployment insurance. Changes that were made to the program in 2013 and were focused on helping get people back to work. We recognize that employment insurance is a temporary measure and a solution that for the huge majority of Canadians believe so as well. The best option is to improve employment insurance to assist people to find jobs and to create jobs. Instead, we have a government who is just taking anything done in the past 10 years, good or bad, and reversing it. We see that with so many of their bills that have been introduced in the past year. This government has indicated that Canadians voted for change, but I am not sure that Canadians who voted for change expected what they're seeing today. I hear all the time, we can do better, and I definitely agree. I'm just wondering, when is this government going to start? Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Well, thank you very much, and I listened with interest to a list of taxes that don't exist that she's concerned about, that the member's concerned about, and I guess you can be concerned about taxes that don't exist, but it seems odd to be concerned about those taxes that don't exist when what does exist is a legacy from a previous government, which is an additional $150 billion on the debt, a debt delivered by mismanagement of the economy by the party opposite. before we even start to talk about the challenges this government faces, could she please give us some ideas on how she would repay that $150 billion, where those resources would come from, and what that party was thinking if it cared so much about taxpayers when it failed to provide any leadership on debt reduction. It went into deficit before the meltdown of 2008 through tax cuts and stayed in that position because of their inability to manage an economy.
The honourable member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Well, thank you very much. And maybe I'm just going to remind the member what a tax is. And it's when people are paying money back out to the government. We are going to see the money, this government taking money from the carbon tax. You may not call it a carbon tax. You may want to call it something fluffier, but that's exactly what it is. It's money that's going to be coming out of everyday Canadians' pockets, and it's going to be put into the coffers of this Liberal government. That is a tax. We are going to see CPP being increased. That is a tax. We hear today, I don't care, personally, people can shake their heads, that's fine. But you and I may have a different idea of what you may call a tax. But even in the last couple of days, we've been asking through our official critic for health, asking about the health and dental tax benefits, and they will not deny it. We see time and time and time again, tax, tax, tax. And I think the one best thing that we can see is a tax to the small businesses that is not being reduced, that is actually hurting the environment for small business and employment. Thank you.
Questions and comments? Question commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do believe that Canadians are actually quite pleased with the progress that this government has made in a relatively short time span. We can talk about, as I have on many occasions, the GIS increase, the increase in the Canada Child Benefit, the tax cut for Canada's middle class. We can talk about the paying the price on carbon. There's so many things that are out there, Mr. Speaker, but focusing on the province of Alberta, a province that's been in need, where we've dealt with the employment insurance, had more of a coordination of different departments, a heavy investment in infrastructure. And I'm wondering if the member can just provide her thoughts in regards to, is there something very specific that she believes that we could be doing as government to assist, something very specific?
The Honourable Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Thank you. I've got two parts to that answer, and I thank you for the question. But Carl Crocker from Sparta wrote, I don't think our present government gives a blank about the average rural taxpayer with the carbon tax, hydro rights, and natural gas going up. We are mad. I think that says to me that Canadians, at least living in Elgin, Middlesex, London, are not happy. So I think that's something, we're hearing from different people, obviously. I'm hearing from the people of Elgin, Middlesex, London in southwestern Ontario. We are not seeing infrastructure being built, where we are not seeing new job creation. And I am fortunate to not live in the province of Ontario right now. I do feel for those persons that live out there who are unemployed. Things that we need to do is we need to create an environment where businesses will come to this country, where businesses will continue to invest in their future for their employees. We have the Canada Jobs Grants that I'm hoping that this government will continue to support, because I only hear from these businesses what it's a great thing when people that they know are great employees get the opportunity to increase their productivity, to increase their knowledge, and so that they continue to have excellent employment. So continue with our training to make sure that we can get people back to work, make sure we're graduating people.
And time for one more short question. The Honourable Member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague from Elgin, Middlesex, London. Anyway, the Liberals always talk about the debt. We paid off $40 billion. We gave them a surplus of $3 billion, which they blew through, plus their slush fund of $6 billion. Haven't created a single full-time job. But the other part of it is rural infrastructure. And they just took money from the Rural Infrastructure Fund to put into this infrastructure bank, which is actually an insurance to protect foreign investors. I'm just wondering if you have a comment about the concern in rural Canada about infrastructure that we likely aren't going to get the money for.
Member for Elgin, Middlesex, London.
Met with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities when they were here on their lobbying week. I asked them directly, are you here to see me as a critic that is looking at something national? Or are you here to see me as a rural MP who represents rural Canada? They wanted to speak to me as a rural Canadian. Funny thing enough, the people were sent from Toronto and Montreal. Now, I think that they do a wonderful job. So 2 days later, I was fortunate enough to have somebody from the City of London come and speak with me. The problem that I see is we are investing into the infrastructure bank. And when I speak to people from urban Canada, they believe that it's going to be good. because it's going to be good for their projects. But we don't have large infrastructure projects of that huge amount, of that huge proportion, unless we amalgamate all of our programs together. So I'm really worried, and I know that Elgin Middlesex London will not see a dollar from that infrastructure bank.
Yeah.